Captain Alan Wolfe stared out the viewport of his quarters aboard the Earth battleship Defiance. The stars looked the same as they always did, cold and distant, but something felt different today. He ran his hand through his short brown hair, a habit from his younger days that surfaced whenever he was troubled. The message from the Galactic Council sat on his desk. It had arrived 3 hours ago, marked with the highest priority. Wolfe had read it 7 times, and still could not believe what it said. "They want me," he muttered to himself. After all these years of treating humans like children playing with matches, a soft knock at his door broke his thoughts. "Enter," he called. Lieutenant Catherine Bell stepped in, her uniform crisp despite the late hour. Her red hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and concern showed in her green eyes. "Sir, the shuttle is ready for your trip to Centauri Prime," she said. "But there's more news. 2 more border systems have gone dark. No distress calls, no emergency beacons, just silence." Wolfe nodded slowly. "That makes 5 in the past week. Whatever this enemy is, it moves fast." Bell handed him a datapad. "Intelligence suggests it might be connected to those old legends, the ones about shadows between stars." "I don't believe in ghost stories, Bell." "Neither did I, sir, until I saw this." She tapped the screen, bringing up an image that made Wolfe's blood run cold. The picture showed a planet, once green and blue, now covered in strange black structures that seemed to bend in impossible ways. This was taken by a scout ship that managed to escape from Proxima II, Bell explained. "The pilot died from some kind of radiation sickness soon after, but got this image back to us." Wolfe studied the picture carefully. In his 20 years of space service, he had never seen technology like this. It didn't look built. It looked grown. "And now the mighty council wants our help," he said with a bitter laugh. "After pushing us to the edges of explored space for decades." "Maybe they're desperate," Bell suggested. "The council doesn't get desperate. They get political." Wolfe stood up and grabbed his jacket. "But I'll hear what they have to say. You're coming with me." Bell looked surprised. "Sir, protocol says you should take Chief Mason as your second for diplomatic missions." "This isn't diplomatic, Bell. This is survival. And I need someone who thinks, not someone who follows rules." He checked his sidearm before attaching it to his belt. "Pack for trouble. I doubt we'll find much peace at Centauri Prime." The journey took 3 days through jump space. When they emerged, the sight of Centauri Prime took their breath away, but not in the way they expected. The jewel of the Council worlds, once surrounded by an elegant dance of ships and stations, now bristled with defense platforms. Refugee ships clustered in holding patterns, and military vessels from a dozen species patrolled with obvious tension. "They're scared," Bell whispered as their shuttle approached the massive council tower that rose from the center of the capital city. Wolfe nodded grimly. "And when the powerful get scared, the weak get sacrificed." They docked at a private bay, where they were met not by the usual honor guard, but by a single elderly alien. His blue skin was pale with age, and his 4 arms were thin but moved with dignity as he bowed slightly. "Captain Wolfe, Lieutenant Bell, I am Representative Orion of Arcturus. Thank you for coming so quickly." His voice was soft but clear. "The council awaits you, but first, there is something I must tell you privately. The situation is far worse than the message indicated." Wolfe exchanged a glance with Bell. "How much worse?" Orion's large eyes blinked slowly. "We are not fighting for territory or resources, Captain. We are fighting for the very existence of all life as we know it. And we are losing." Orion led Wolfe and Bell through dim corridors. The Grand Council building, once bright with light from 100 worlds, now ran on emergency power. They passed aliens from species Wolfe had only seen in books. All wore the same look of fear. "The enemy we face is called the Void Harbingers," Orion said quietly. "Most thought they were just old stories to frighten children. But they're real," Bell said. "Very real. They exist partly in our world and partly in another dimension. Our weapons pass through them like they're made of smoke. Their weapons. Orion stopped walking and pulled back his sleeve. A black mark spread across his blue skin, like a shadow that would not fade. Their touch brings slow death. They entered a small room. A large screen showed a map of the galaxy with red marks covering nearly half the systems. Each red spot is a world that has fallen, Orion explained. 26 council worlds in just 30 days. Wolfe studied the pattern. They're moving in a spiral toward the center. Toward here. Yes. Very observant, Captain. Most council members refused to see the pattern until it was too late. Bell leaned closer to the map. Why didn't the council act sooner? Orion's forehands moved in a gesture of shame. Pride. The first reports came from the drift nomads and other species we do not respect. Species without grand fleets or ancient histories. We ignored their warnings. Like you ignored humans when we warned about the solar flares 3 years ago, Wolfe said coldly. Yes, like that. Orion did not deny it. Our arrogance may doom us all. A door slid open. A tall, thin alien with gray skin and a ridge of small spikes along its head entered. Its eyes, black and empty, fixed on Wolfe with clear dislike. President Salnar, Orion said with a small bow. This is Captain Wolfe and Lieutenant Bell from Earth. I know who they are. Salnar's voice was like dry leaves. The council meeting begins in 10 minutes. Try not to embarrass your primitive species. After Salnar left, Wolfe raised an eyebrow at Orion. Charming. President Salnar led the movement to limit human expansion, Orion explained. He believes your kind is too dangerous to be allowed free movement among the stars. And now he needs our help, Bell said. Yes, it hurts his pride deeply. They entered the council chamber. 50 seats arranged in a circle, but only 31 were filled. Wolfe noticed the empty spaces, each marked with the flag of a world now lost to the Void Harbingers. Captain Alan Wolfe of Earth, Salnar announced from the center platform. You have been summoned because of your tactical skills and knowledge of unconventional warfare. Wolfe stepped forward. I'm listening. An image appeared above the center of the room, a recording from a battle. Council ships fired at strange black vessels that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. The council weapons passed through them without effect. Then the black ships fired back. Green beams cut through shields like they weren't there. Ships exploded or simply went dark. This was 3 days ago, Salnar said. Our last major defense fleet. We lost 47 ships. We destroyed none of theirs. The chamber fell silent. Wolfe walked slowly around the image, studying it from all angles. You can't fight them conventionally, he finally said. Your tactics are too rigid, too predictable. A rumble of anger moved through the council members. Salnar's eyes narrowed. And humans could do better. Perhaps. We've spent most of our history fighting each other. We're good at finding weaknesses, at adapting quickly. Wolfe looked around the room. But I'll need complete freedom to act, without council interference. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Salnar raised his hands for silence. You ask too much, human. The council does not grant such authority, even now. Orion stepped forward. Perhaps Captain Wolfe is right. Our ways have failed us. The old rules may not save us. Careful, Orion, Salnar warned. That borders on treason. Before Orion could reply, the chamber shook violently. Alarms screamed to life. They're here, someone shouted. The Harbingers have reached Centauri Prime. The council chamber shook again. Pieces of the ornate ceiling fell around them. Panic spread through the room as council members rushed toward the exits. This way, Orion shouted, pointing to a side door. The emergency bunkers are below. Wolfe grabbed Bell's arm. No, we need to see what we're up against. He turned to Orion. Is there an observation deck? Somewhere we can view the attack. Orion hesitated, then nodded. Follow me. They ran through trembling corridors while most others fled downward. They climbed a narrow spiral staircase until they reached a clear dome at the top of the council tower. The sight took their breath away. Black ships, shaped like twisted stars, moved through the sky. They seemed to flicker in and out of view, as if they weren't fully in this world. The city's defense cannons fired bright beams that passed harmlessly through the ships. "They're phasing," Wolfe said, watching closely. "But not completely. Look." He pointed as one ship briefly solidified to fire, then shifted back to its ghostly state. "They have to become solid to attack." Bell nodded. "A weakness, but how do we hit them during that split second?" The tower shook violently. A massive explosion lit up the sky as a defense platform was destroyed. "We should join the others," Orion urged. "This place isn't safe." "Nowhere is safe now," Wolfe replied. He pulled out a small device from his pocket and began recording the battle. "We need to understand their attack pattern." For 10 long minutes, they watched as the Harbinger ships systematically destroyed Centauri Prime's defenses. Wolfe noticed they moved in a strange, flowing formation, never breaking their pattern even when it seemed inefficient. "They're connected somehow," he said, "like they share one mind." Another explosion, closer this time. The observation deck cracked. "Now we go," Wolfe ordered, pulling Orion toward the stairs. They descended quickly, finding chaos in the lower levels. Fire suppression systems sprayed mist through smoke-filled halls. Injured council members and staff stumbled through the corridors. "Help me," a voice called. A young alien lay trapped under fallen debris, 2 of his 6 limbs crushed. Without hesitation, Wolfe and Bell lifted the heavy beam. Orion helped the injured alien to his feet. "This way to the medical bay," Orion said, supporting the wounded alien. As they moved through the building, they found more injured. Bell organized survivors into a rescue team, while Wolfe used his military training to treat the worst wounds. When they finally reached the underground bunker, they found President Salner and other council leaders arguing loudly. "The defense fleet must retreat to protect the inner systems," one shouted. "No, they must stay and fight to the last ship," countered another. Salner noticed Wolfe entering. "You, human, where were you when the attack began?" "Watching. Learning." Wolfe approached the central table where a holographic display showed the battle above. "Your ships are fighting in traditional formations. It won't work against this enemy." "And you know better." Salner sneered. "I saw their weakness," Wolfe replied calmly. "They must become solid to attack. That's when they're vulnerable." The bunker shook. Emergency lights flickered. "They've breached the lower atmosphere," a technician reported. "Estimate 30 minutes until they reach the ground." "We need to evacuate," a council member suggested. "There's no time," Bell said. "Their ships are blocking all exit vectors." Silence fell across the room. Fear showed on every face. Wolfe stepped forward. "I need command authority over your remaining forces. Now." "Absurd," Salner spat. "We will not." "President," Orion interrupted. "Captain Wolfe and Lieutenant Bell saved many lives today while we hid down here. They studied the enemy while we argued. Perhaps we should listen." Another explosion, closer and louder. 20 minutes until ground forces arrive," the technician updated. All eyes turned to Wolfe. He stood tall, his face calm despite the chaos around him. "Choose now," he said simply. "Trust me or die here." After a long moment, Salner nodded stiffly. "Very well, human. Show us what you can do." "I'll need your command codes and direct lines to all remaining ships," Wolfe said. As the council leaders reluctantly provided what he needed, Bell leaned close to Wolfe. "Can we really beat them?" she whispered. "No," he admitted quietly. "Not today. But we can survive. That's enough for now." 3 days after the attack on Centauri Prime, Wolfe stood on the bridge of the Earth battleship Defiance. The once grand capital of the Galactic Council lay in ruins behind them. Half the city was covered in strange black structures that seemed to grow like plants. The surviving council members and thousands of refugees had been evacuated to a temporary base in a nearby system. "All ships report ready," Captain Bell said, looking up from her console. Wolfe nodded. The fleet before him was unlike any in Council history. Instead of the neat, organized battle groups favored by Council admirals, this was a mismatched collection of vessels. Fast scout ships from Earth flew alongside heavy cruisers from Arcturus. Small, nimble fighters from the rim worlds darted between larger vessels. "It's not much of a fleet," Wolfe admitted. "It's all we have," Bell replied. 27 ships from 7 different worlds. Wolfe tapped a button, opening a channel to all ships. "This is Captain Wolfe. You've all been briefed on our mission. We're not looking for a fight today. We're looking for a place to hide, to plan, to survive." He paused, looking at the faces watching him from screens around the bridge. The Council fleet was destroyed because they fought the way they always fought. We will not make that mistake. We will not follow their rules. We will make our own. The Defiance led the small fleet away from Centauride Prime, jumping into hyperspace toward the outer rim of the galaxy. 2 days later, they arrived at their destination, the Cygnus Cloud, a vast region of gas, dust, and radiation that most space travelers avoided. But humans had been mapping safe routes through it for years. "Follow our path exactly," Wolfe instructed the fleet. 1 kilometer off course, and the radiation will fry your ship's systems. The fleet followed the Defiance into the cloud. Strange lights danced around them as radiation interacted with their shields. Many of the alien crews were visibly nervous, having been taught that the Cygnus Cloud meant certain death. Hours later, they emerged into a hidden pocket of clear space inside the cloud. A perfect hiding spot, shielded from sensors by the surrounding radiation. "Begin establishing the base," Wolfe ordered. "I want sensor arrays pointing in all directions. If the Harbingers so much as sneeze near this cloud, I want to know about it." As the fleet set up their hidden base, Wolfe called a meeting with the ship captains. They gathered in the Defiance's conference room, a collection of different species united by desperation. "The Harbingers have taken 29 Council worlds," Wolfe began. "They move in a pattern, always toward systems with large populations. We need to understand why." "To feed, perhaps," suggested Captain Nara, a reptilian female from the outer systems. "They consume life." "Or resources," added another captain. "Planets rich in certain elements." Wolfe shook his head. "It's more than that. They're searching for something specific." He turned to Bell. "Lieutenant, what's your plan for intelligence gathering?" Bell stepped forward. "We've converted our fastest ships into stealth scouts. They'll observe Harbinger movements and report back. We won't engage, just watch and learn." "A coward's approach," growled a large furry captain from a warrior race. "A smart approach," Wolfe corrected firmly. "We have 27 ships against thousands of theirs. We need information more than glory." Later, alone in his quarters, Wolfe studied star charts. Something about the Harbinger's attack pattern nagged at him. Their movements seemed too deliberate, too methodical. A soft chime announced a visitor. Orion entered, looking tired but resolute. "Captain, I have news. There's a species known as the drift nomads. They live in the spaces between stars, traveling in generation ships. The Council never offered them membership, considering them too primitive." "Let me guess," Wolfe said. "They've been fighting the Harbingers longer than anyone." Orion nodded. "Their ships were spotted at the edges of 3 battles. They seem to know when and where the Harbingers will appear." "How? What makes them different?" "They evolved in space, Captain. Their senses work differently than planet dwellers. They can perceive shifts between dimensions." Wolfe stood up quickly. "I need to meet them. President Salner has forbidden contact with non-Council species. He says it would dilute our response." Wolfe's face hardened. "Salner doesn't command this fleet. I do. Find me a way to contact these drift nomads." As Orion left, Bell entered with a data pad. "Sir, first reports from our scout ships. They've observed something strange. The Harbinger's ships change formation when they cross certain regions of space, almost like they're avoiding something invisible. Wolfe took the pad, a plan forming in his mind, or feeling something that hurts them. What's our next move, sir? Something the council would never approve of, Wolfe said with a grim smile. We're going to make some new friends. The meeting with the drift nomads took place in neutral space, far from any council territory. Wolfe had chosen to bring only the Defiance, not wanting to frighten potential allies with a show of force. When the nomad ship appeared, Wolfe understood why the council had dismissed them. Their vessel looked like junk welded together, a collection of salvaged parts from 100 different ships. It drifted rather than flew, moving with the currents of space. They're hailing us, Bell reported from her station. The main screen lit up. A humanoid figure appeared, skin pale blue and nearly transparent. Wolfe could see the pulse of blood vessels beneath the skin. The being's eyes were enormous, with no visible pupils. I am Saren of the Star Drifters, the being said. You seek our help against the Void Ones. Yes, Wolfe replied. You've been fighting them longer than anyone. Not fighting. Surviving. There is a difference. Saren's voice was musical, rising and falling like waves. Why should we help you, planet-born? The Council has denied us aid for generations. I'm not the Council, Wolfe said simply. I'm just trying to save lives. Saren studied him for a long moment. Come aboard. Alone. We will speak. Bell stepped forward. Sir, that's too dangerous. We need them, Bell, Wolfe said quietly. Wait for my signal. If I'm not back in 3 hours, leave without me. The inside of the Nomad ship was unlike anything Wolfe had seen. The walls seemed alive, pulsing with light that followed movement. The air smelled of spices and electricity. Saren led him to a circular room where other nomads floated in what looked like liquid air. They moved without walking, drifting like clouds. You saw the Void Ones become solid when they attack, Saren said. It wasn't a question. Yes. How did you know? We see the spaces between spaces, what you call dimensions. Saren waved a hand, and the air between them rippled, showing images of the Harbinger ships. They exist partly in the dark dimension, partly in yours, but they are looking for something. What do they want? The key points. The anchors between worlds. Saren's large eyes blinked slowly. Long ago, our ancestors helped seal the pathways. Now the Void Ones seek to open them fully. Before Wolfe could ask more questions, his communicator beeped urgently. Captain. Bell's voice came through, tense with worry. We're receiving an emergency signal from our base. They're under attack. Wolfe's blood ran cold. How? The radiation should have hidden us. Someone gave away our location. Wolfe turned to Saren. I need to go. The nomad nodded. We will follow. What you face is our battle too. When Wolfe returned to the Defiance, bad news awaited. The hidden base in the Cygnus cloud had been attacked by a small fleet of Harbinger ships. Half their forces were destroyed before the rest escaped. How did they find us? Wolfe demanded, pacing the bridge. Sir, Bell said hesitantly, we intercepted a transmission. From President Selner to an unknown destination. He sent our coordinates. Why would he betray his own people? Bell handed him a datapad. The transmission included this. Solnar offered the Harbingers a deal. Certain territories would be surrendered, including Earth, in exchange for sparing Centauri and other core worlds. Wolfe stared at the evidence, his face hardening. He's sacrificing us to save himself. What do we do? Tell the other council members. Wolfe was quiet for a long moment. No. The coalition is fragile enough. If we expose Talnar now, half our allies might return to council space, believing his promises of safety. So we do nothing? Bell asked, shocked. We continue the mission. But we watch Selner very closely. Wolfe looked at the star map showing Earth, far from their current position. And we prepare for the worst. Captain, Bell said softly, Maybe you should return to Earth. Warn them. Wolfe shook his head. If I leave now, this alliance falls apart. The best way to protect Earth is to stop the Harbingers here. The Drift Nomad ship arrived, followed by 5 more of their strange vessels. You have new allies, Bell observed. And new information. Wolfe pulled up a galactic map. The Nomads say the Harbingers are looking for key points in space, anchors between dimensions. If we find these points first, we might have a chance. Sir, the communications officer called out, President Salner is demanding your return to Council space. He says your unauthorized contact with the Nomads is treason. Wolfe smiled grimly. Tell him we're busy hunting Harbingers. Let him wonder what we know about his dealings. Bell moved closer, speaking quietly. Are you sure about this, sir? We're breaking every council rule. Rules won't save us, Bell. Innovation will. And sometimes, he looked at the stars beyond the view screen. Salvation comes from those the powerful ignore. I'll prepare the scout ships to coordinate with the Nomads, Bell said, new determination in her voice. As she left, Wolfe stood alone, the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. He had chosen a dangerous path, saving the Council despite its corruption. He only hoped he could fulfill the promise he had made to himself, to return to Earth, whatever the cost. 2 weeks after meeting the Drift Nomads, Wolfe's coalition scored their first real victory. A small group of Harbinger ships was caught in an asteroid field near the Orion sector. Using tactics developed with the Nomads, Wolfe's forces attacked when the enemy ships phased into solid form to navigate the dense rocks. 3 Harbinger vessels were destroyed without any coalition losses. It wasn't much against the thousands of enemy ships, but it proved they could be beaten. The celebration aboard the Defiance was brief but heartfelt. For the first time since the war began, there was hope. Sir, we have something, Bell said, entering Wolfe's office with barely contained excitement. The scout team captured a damaged Harbinger ship. Wolfe stood quickly. Any survivors? No, but the ship itself is intact enough to study. It's being towed to a secure location now. Within hours, a team of scientists from various species was studying the captured vessel. The ship itself seemed partly alive, with systems that were grown rather than built. Wolfe watched through a protective barrier as they worked. Fascinating, said Dr. Leon, the chief human scientist. The material responds to thought patterns. It's like the ship is an extension of its pilot. Can we use their technology? Wolfe asked. Not directly. It's designed for their biology. But we're learning how they phase between dimensions. Dr. Leon pointed to a pulsing organ-like structure at the ship's center. This seems to be their dimensional drive. A drift nomad floated forward, its large eyes fixed on the drive. This is old technology. Very old. How old? Asked Wolfe. Before the Council, before most species reached the stars. The nomad's transparent skin rippled with colors. This design, we have seen it before, in the ancient records of the first ones. Over the next days, as more tests were conducted, a disturbing theory emerged. Dr. Leon presented the findings to Wolfe and the other coalition leaders. The Harbingers aren't invaders, he explained. They're coming home. A murmur of confusion spread through the room. We've analyzed their genetic structure from tissue samples, Leon continued. They evolved in this galaxy, not another dimension. They were the first dominant species in our galaxy, millions of years before any of our civilizations. If this is their home, why did they leave? Asked Captain Nera. They didn't leave willingly. According to data in their ship's memory banks, they were forced into dimensional exile during an ancient conflict. They've been trying to return ever since. Wolfe leaned forward. And the key points Saren mentioned. The anchors between worlds. Energy conduits, Leon said. Natural phenomena that create bridges between dimensions. The Harbingers need these points to fully return to our space. That explains their attack pattern, Bell realized. They're securing these conduits. How many are there? Wolfe asked. 5 major ones across the galaxy. They'd secured 3 already. The room grew quiet as the implications sank in. "There's something else," Leon said hesitantly. "Evidence in their ship's data suggests the Council founders knew about the Harbingers. They knew this history." Orion's blue skin paled. "Impossible. The founding species of the Council discovered ancient Harbinger technology. They built their early starships using principles learned from it. But they kept this knowledge secret, fearing it would undermine their authority if younger species knew they hadn't invented space travel themselves." Wolfe stood, anger clear on his face. "So the Council has been lying for centuries. And now we're all paying the price." Later, alone with Bell and Orion, Wolfe paced his quarters. "If the Harbingers are just trying to come home, why are they killing everyone?" Bell asked. "Revenge," Orion suggested, "for their exile." "Or desperation," Wolfe countered. "Maybe their dimension is dying. Maybe they have no choice." "What do we do with this information?" Bell asked. "We use it," Wolfe said firmly. "Now we know what they want. We can predict where they'll go next. And maybe," he hesitated, "maybe we can find a different solution than just killing each other." "The Council would never negotiate with them," Orion said. "The Council isn't here," Wolfe replied. "We are." The next morning, as Wolfe prepared plans to defend the remaining energy conduits, an urgent message arrived from one of their scout ships. "Sir," Bell reported, "the largest Harbinger fleet we've ever seen is gathering near Arcturus. It looks like they're preparing for a major assault." "Arcturus," Orion whispered. "My homeworld." "And the location of the 4th energy conduit," Wolfe added grimly. "This is it. They're making their move." As orders went out to the Coalition fleet, Wolfe stared at the star map. Something about this felt wrong. The Harbingers had been careful, methodical. Why risk everything on one massive attack? "Bell," he said suddenly, "check the records. When the Council first formed, which species was the most powerful? Who led the founding?" Bell checked the data. "The Arcturians, Orion's people." Wolfe turned to Orion. "Your ancestors knew the most about the Harbingers. They would have kept records, preserved knowledge." Orion nodded slowly. "There are archives beneath the capital city, records going back to before the Council. That's what they want," Wolfe realized. "Not just the conduit. Knowledge. The secrets of how they were exiled in the first place." He opened a channel to the fleet. "Change of plans. We're not just defending Arcturus. We're going in first. We need to find those archives before the Harbingers do." Bell looked concerned. "Sir, we're outnumbered 10-1. Sometimes the direct approach is the last thing the enemy expects," Wolfe said with a grim smile. "Especially from humans." The Coalition fleet arrived at Arcturus a day ahead of the Harbingers. The blue-green world, home to Orion's people, shimmered against the backdrop of space. Its rings of defensive platforms looked strong, but Wolfe knew they would not hold against a full Harbinger assault. "Begin evacuation of the capital city," Wolfe ordered. "Priority on scientists, historians, and archive keepers." Orion stood beside him on the bridge, his 4 arms clasped in a gesture of prayer. "Many will not leave. They believe the defenses will hold." "Then convince them," Wolfe said firmly. "We have 12 hours before the Harbingers arrive." As evacuation ships streamed from the planet's surface, Wolfe and a small team took a shuttle down to the capital. The city was ancient, with buildings that spiraled toward the sky in impossible shapes. "The archives are beneath the Council building," Orion explained as they hurried through near-empty streets. "Few have access. Even I needed special permission." The archive entrance was hidden behind a wall of shimmering energy in the oldest part of the building. Orion placed all 4 hands on separate panels, and the wall dissolved. "Only those with Arcturian blood may enter," he said. Wolfe nodded. "Go. Find what we need. We'll secure the area." Orion disappeared into the archive. Bell organized the security team, while Wolfe studied a map of the surrounding area. "The conduit is here," he said, pointing to a location 10 kilometers from the city. A natural formation of crystals that channels energy between dimensions. The Harbingers will target it directly. And the city? Bell asked. Secondary target, but they'll destroy it to get to the archives. Wolfe looked up as the sound of distant explosions reached them. They're early. Bell checked her communicator. Orbital defenses are engaging the first wave, but there are too many of them. Where is Skalnar? Wolfe asked suddenly. His ship left the fleet before we arrived. Said he was gathering reinforcements. Wolfe's face darkened. Or making another deal. Before he could say more, Orion emerged from the archives, carrying a small crystal device. I found it, he said, his voice shaking. The truth. All of it. What truth? The Harbingers were not exiled. They fled. Orion activated the device, projecting images into the air. A natural disaster was destroying the galaxy, a wave of energy that broke down the barriers between dimensions. The Harbingers found a way to survive by shifting partially into another dimension. But the record said they were forced out in a war, Bell said. A lie. The early Council species discovered the Harbingers' technology and used it to push the dimensional barriers closed again, trapping the Harbingers on the other side. They claimed victory in a war that never happened. The building shook as explosions drew closer. We need to go, Bell urged. Wait, Wolfe said, studying the projected images. The barrier technology. Is it still here? Orion nodded. The original devices are stored in the deepest vault. 5 of them, 1 for each major conduit. Get them. Now. As Orion rushed back into the archives, Wolfe turned to Bell. I have an idea. Something other than fighting. Sir, with all respect, they're killing millions. Because they're desperate. Their dimension is collapsing. They need to return home. Wolfe's eyes were intense. What if we could stabilize the barriers? Create a permanent, controlled passage? Bell looked doubtful. After centuries of war. Sometimes peace comes from understanding your enemy. Orion returned with 5 small devices, each glowing with soft blue light. These are the originals. They're set to push the barriers close, but they could be recalibrated. The building shook violently. Part of the ceiling collapsed nearby. We're out of time, Bell shouted over the noise. Our ships report the Harbinger fleet has broken through. They'll reach the surface in minutes. They ran for the shuttle, dodging falling debris. Outside, the sky had turned black with smoke and the strange distortions that signaled Harbinger ships. The shuttle barely cleared the city before the council building exploded behind them. Harbinger ships swarmed everywhere, their black forms shifting in and out of visibility. Get us to the conduit, Wolfe ordered the pilot. The conduit? That's where their main force is headed. Exactly. The shuttle raced low over the landscape, sensors jamming to avoid detection. They'd reached the crystal formation just as the first Harbinger ships arrived above it. Land behind that ridge, Wolfe ordered. Bell, take half the team and set up a defensive perimeter. Orion and I will approach the conduit. The conduit itself was beautiful. A natural formation of crystals that reached 50 meters into the sky. It pulsed with energy that bent light around it. The devices, Wolfe said, holding out his hand to Orion. As they prepared to move forward, a council shuttle landed nearby. President Salner emerged with 4 armed guards. Stop them, he shouted, pointing at Wolfe. They're trying to destroy the conduit. The guards raised their weapons. No, Wolfe called out. We're trying to stabilize it, to find a peaceful solution. Lies, Zollner spat. The human wants to control the technology for Earth's advantage. They've always wanted council power. Orion stepped forward. I have the archive records, Salner. I know the truth about the council's founding, about the lie we've lived with for generations. Salner's face twisted with rage. The council must survive. Our authority must not be questioned. Better to sacrifice some worlds than lose everything. Above them, The sky darkened as a massive harbinger ship positioned itself over the conduit. Energy began to build, distorting the air itself. "It's opening the pathway fully," Orion said in awe. "If it succeeds, thousands of harbinger ships will pour through at once." Wolfe looked from the conduit to Xalnar, then to the devices in his hands. The time for hesitation was over. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, and he had to make a choice. The sky above the conduit rippled like water as the harbinger ship poured energy into it. The air itself seemed to bend and stretch, revealing glimpses of another dimension beyond. "This ends now," Xalnar said, his guards moving forward. "Surrender the devices." "Wait," Wolfe said, raising a hand. "Look." Above them, a small dark shape emerged from the distortion. Then another. They weren't ships but small pods. They landed softly around the conduit. The pods opened, and for the first time, they saw the harbingers themselves. They were tall, with bodies that seemed to shift between solid and transparent. Their skin absorbed light rather than reflected it. They moved with a fluid grace that seemed unnatural. One approached, larger than the others. It stopped several meters away, studying them with eyes that had no color at all. "They've come to talk," Wolfe said quietly, "not to fight. They destroy worlds." Xalnar hissed. "To survive," Orion replied, "just as we would." Wolfe stepped forward, placing himself between his group and the harbinger. Behind him, Bell and her team kept weapons ready but didn't fire. "We know the truth," Wolfe said to the harbinger, "about what happened centuries ago, about how you were trapped." A harbinger made no sound, but in Wolfe's mind, he felt something, a pressure, as if something was trying to communicate. "I think they're telepathic," he said. "They're trying to speak to us." Orion moved beside him. "My people have legends of mind speakers from the early days." The pressure in Wolfe's mind increased, forming patterns that slowly became words. "Dying," he heard /felt. "Home dying. Return necessary." Wolfe looked at Orion. "Did you feel that?" The Arcturian nodded. "They're saying their dimension is collapsing. They need to come back. And destroy us in the process," Xalnar demanded. The harbinger turned toward Xalnar, and the pressure changed, becoming sharper. "Betrayer blood," Wolfe translated, the words clear in his mind. "Old enemy." Xalnar raised his weapon. "Enough of this. Guards, take those devices and destroy the conduit." "No." Orion moved to block him. "This is our chance for peace." Xalnar fired, the energy beam catching Orion in the chest. The old Arcturian fell, his blue skin darkening where the beam had struck. The harbingers reacted instantly, their forms solidifying as they prepared to attack. "Stop," Wolfe shouted, to both sides. "This solves nothing." He knelt beside Orion, who grasped his hand weakly. "The devices," Orion whispered, "not to close, to stabilize." Understanding flooded through Wolfe. He stood and faced the lead harbinger. "We can help you," he said clearly, holding up one of the devices, "not to invade, not to destroy, but to return properly." The pressure in his mind changed, became questioning. "These can stabilize the conduits," Wolfe explained. "Create permanent, safe passages between dimensions. You can return home without destroying ours." He felt doubt, suspicion. "I'm not council," Wolfe said. "I'm human. We weren't part of the original deception. I have no reason to lie." The harbinger looked at Xalnar, then back at Wolfe. Slowly, it extended a hand toward the device. "No." Xalnar charged forward, firing wildly. The harbinger phased, the beams passing through it. Then it solidified and moved with impossible speed. It didn't attack Xalnar. Instead, it touched his head gently. Xalnar froze, his eyes wide. Then he collapsed to his knees, trembling. "It showed him the truth," Bell said in wonder. "About everything." The harbinger turned back to Wolfe and extended its hand again. This time, Wolfe placed the device in its palm. The creature studied it, then began to adjust something inside with long, delicate fingers. When it finished, it returned the device to Wolfe and pointed to the conduit. "It wants us to place it," Wolfe said. He looked around at his team. "Together. That's the only way forward." Bell helped him carry Orion, who insisted on being part of this moment despite his wound. They approached the conduit, feeling its energy wash over them in waves. Following the Harbinger's mental instructions, they positioned the device at the base of the crystal formation. The other 4 devices would need to be placed at the remaining conduits across the galaxy. "Now," Wolfe said, "let's rewrite history." He activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then energy surged through the crystals. The distortion above them changed, becoming stable, like a window rather than a tear. Through it, they could see the Harbinger's dimension. Beautiful but dying, its energy fading. "It's working," Bell whispered. The lead Harbinger approached the stabilized conduit and reached through. Its hand didn't vanish but remained visible on both sides. The true bridge between worlds. In Wolfe's mind, he felt gratitude and relief from the creature. Then something more. Images of cooperation, of shared knowledge, of healing both dimensions. 3 days later, news of what happened spread throughout the galaxy. The Harbinger attacks stopped everywhere. At each conduit, they placed the remaining devices, creating stable pathways between dimensions. The Council, or what remained of it, collapsed under the weight of the centuries of lies revealed in the Arcturian archives. Solnar resigned in disgrace. Orion, recovering from his wound, proposed a new form of galactic governance, one where all species had a voice, even those previously ignored by the Council. "And the Harbingers?" Bell asked, as they watched ships from a dozen worlds gather around Earth for the first meeting of this new alliance. "They're helping rebuild the worlds damaged in the fighting," Wolfe said. "Their technology, properly understood, could benefit everyone." "So you didn't defeat them after all?" Bell said with a small smile. "No," Wolfe agreed, watching as a Harbinger ship docked peacefully with an Earth station. "I understood them. Sometimes that's better than victory." Orion joined them, moving slowly but with purpose. "The galaxy will never be the same," he said, "but perhaps it will be better." Wolfe nodded, looking out at the stars. The Galactic Council was defeated, their secrets and corruption exposed. But the Harbingers were not defeated. Instead, 2 ancient enemies had found a way forward that neither could have imagined alone. "Better," Wolfe agreed, thinking of all the lives saved on both sides. "Definitely better." As the sun rose over Earth, news arrived that the first official Harbinger diplomatic delegation would arrive the next day. A new chapter in galactic history was beginning, written not in the language of war and deception, but in the shared hopes of species learning to understand each other. Wolfe smiled as he watched the distant ships moving peacefully through space. Sometimes, the greatest victory was avoiding a fight altogether.